So I know it sounds a little cliche, but there's no way I'd rather be on a Sunday morning than with other public sector workers. Public sector worker myself, I think everybody in this room knows that public sector workers are under attack at every level, right? From city all the way to the national, okay? So when I got the invitation to come out here, it was no question I was gonna be here on a Sunday morning. Happy to be here and glad to see some new faces, unfamiliar faces, all that. Just know that we stand with y'all. So given that we're under attack from the city all the way to the national level, when I say city workers, y'all say organized. City workers.
Organized.
County workers.
Organized.
State workers.
Organized.
Federal workers.
Organized.
All right, well, I got a couple asterisks here. It says unless you're in ICE or the POPO, so we'll set that aside. So real quick, for folks who don't know me, my name is Carlos Perez. I'm a high school social studies teacher in Durham Public Schools. I'm a proud member of the Durham Association of Educators, which is connected to the North Carolina Association of Educators. Been an educator for 10 years, coming on my 10 year here in North Carolina at Jordan High School. I just stepped off the board for DAE, but I'm also on the board for Labor Notes. For those who are familiar with Labor Notes, if you've seen the publication or if you've been to any of the trainings, if you're interested to learn more, let me know. But being here and thinking about the fact that I'm about to go back to school, I was just talking to this man over here. Both of us got kids coming into the new school year. I'm gonna be starting teaching again. And every year, once I get to this point in U.S. history, because I teach U.S. history, I teach sociology, I teach Latin American studies, we get to this period known as the Gilded Age. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Gilded Age before, right? It's this period right after the Civil War. And so it's that time of the year where I can start talking to my students a little bit more about unions, a little bit more about strikes, those sorts of things. And so I always ask them, what do you think a union is, right? See what I get. Usually not too much, it's pretty vague. And I'll ask them, what do you think it means to go on strike? They have a, general sense. But then I'll start asking them follow-up questions like, well, what's a union you've heard of? What's a strike that you've heard of? And again, I've always gotten mixed responses. I've been teaching for 10 years. And when I started teaching, I got very little. But I wanted to say that in the last 5 years or so, I started to get more and more responses from students in the room, and that's because of the work that we've all been doing in this room, right? And just the last couple years, when I asked those questions and we started to go around, all of a sudden kids started to name specific unions, right? Kids started to name specific strikes, okay? And one of those specific strikes that they named was the sanitation workers strike in Durham, right? That's right. When your trash doesn't get picked up for about a week, you start to notice, you start to ask questions about what's going on, right? And so students were real quick, and I mean multiple classes, not just like one or two students, were real quick to say, didn't the sanitation workers go on strike? I said, yeah, that's right. And then they would turn to me and be like, didn't y'all also go on strike? I said, yes. And I think it's important to remember, right, in North Carolina, we know this, it's illegal for public sector workers to go on strike. Okay, but in both cases, those were strikes in Durham that shook the city. Okay, and it gives you a sense of the kind of power that we have as public sector workers when we are organized and when we're ready to take the kind of action that we need to fight back, right? So I know that since then, UE has had a lot of victories. I don't know all of them. That's why I'm here. I want to learn more. But I know we can point to pay raises for city workers in Durham and Raleigh, Charlotte, and Greensboro. I know that y'all have helped build Library Workers United in Wake and Durham. I know that y'all launched a campaign to push back against state attacks on our healthcare. That's something that we're also struggling with as educators across the state, so we stand with y'all in that struggle as well. I'm sure the list goes on. But I think what's important is not just that we've won some stuff, right? But it's also about how we win those things, okay? And we really need to underline the how, because I think that often gets set aside when we just go, oh yeah, we won this, and that, okay? How do we do it is critical. And to me, that's why UE is so important, okay? When I think about UE and I think about some of the just like baseline principles that the union has been built on and continues to build on, not just here in North Carolina, but around the country, you start to realize like you won't find this in every union, right? And we had to build these things in DAE, and we're starting to build more of them into our practice across the state in the North Carolina Association of Educators. So I'm talking about rank and file control, which y'all already know about. Okay, you're practicing on a day-to-day basis. Talking about aggressive struggle, right? We just finished talking about sanitation workers strike. Talking about international solidarity, recognizing that our fight does not stop at the borders of the United States, right? It's global. The principle of independence, the recognition that nobody's coming to save us, especially not these two parties that have been in power for decades and decades and decades as our conditions continue to deteriorate, right? And the fact that we need to unite all workers, okay? And again, these are principles that we can't take for granted. It's ones that we've had to build through struggle in DAE through my union. And I wanted to share with y'all at least some of how we've started to do that in the last few years, because we have seen some real transformations in my union, which is starting to spread to other chapters around the state. And it started a few years back with a campaign we call Commit to Majority, okay? When we started the school year, we were a minority union, just like all of our locals across the state. We represented maybe 20+% of workers in Durham public schools. And it's important to know DAE is a wall-to-wall union, so we're not just teachers. Yes, I'm a teacher, but we represent all workers in Durham public schools. That includes bus drivers, custodians, instructional assistants, you name it. If you work in Durham public schools, you can be in the union, okay? But there's a line that gets drawn between what's called certified and classified workers. So I'm a certified worker as a teacher, and then classified workers are the other ones I just mentioned, bus drivers, custodians, and so on. They tend to be lowest paid, disproportionately Black and brown workers, right? And we set out on an ambitious campaign to transform our union from a minority union to a fighting majority union, okay? And we did that through a budget fight. We went around and we identified issues we were gonna organize around for that budget. We had an aggressive approach that was going into buildings all over the district. I was taking off days of work to go to bus lots at 5 in the morning before going to work. That's the kind of stuff we were doing every day. And we were making steady progress, building our membership, getting more people involved in the struggle, more people involved in the campaign. And then over the MLK weekend that year, the school district for Durham Public Schools decided that they were going to pull back a raise that they had given to classified workers. Again, the lowest paid workers in the district. They gave them a raise at the beginning of the year, and at that point, those workers started making decisions for their families, for themselves, right? They started, maybe they bought a car, maybe they, got some clothes or whatever, right? And over MLK weekend, the district said, oh, we fucked up, right? We can't pay y'all that money. We're gonna have to take it back. And what we gave y'all, we need that back. So imagine, right, you've been getting paid such and such amount for however many months, and then your boss hits you up and say, hey, we're gonna need all that money back, okay? So in our original plan for this campaign, we said, we're probably or hopefully gonna get to majority by May, and we're also trying to get strike ready, just in case, for May. So we thought, well, we might go on strike in May. This should happen in January, okay? And those workers responded. They already started to organize wildcat strikes at different schools around the district. So one school you'd show up, cafeteria workers, they ain't there. Another school you'd show up, front office staff, won't find them, right? Custodians at another school. So we as a union had to say, okay, we got to step up and stand with our coworkers, okay? It doesn't matter if we're fully ready or not, and we were not fully ready, okay? We had a number of buildings that were, but not all buildings across the district were ready to go on strike, okay? But instead, we took a page out of the UAW's book. They had just recently done the stand-up strike where they did these rolling strikes. So we ended up doing rolling sick-outs, right? We all managed to get sick on the exact same day, okay? So we started with, I think it was 12 schools and pushed for certain demands in solidarity with classified workers, okay? They didn't meet our demands fully, they missed some. And so we said, okay, we're gonna throw out another batch of 9 schools, okay? And we ended up shutting down almost around 20 schools in a district around 50 or so schools. So almost half of the schools in the district, but we shook the city in just a couple days and managed to not only make sure that there were no clawbacks, that those workers didn't have to pay that money back, but that we kept their paychecks whole for the rest of the year. We built to majority. We built democratic structures. We showed the city that we could shut the school district down if we want to. And at the end of the year, we won the biggest budget in Durham Public Schools history. Okay? So we're still fighting to sustain that majority, okay? It's not easy, as y'all know. There's high turnover in public sector. We're facing that too because of the conditions that we face, but we won all those things the first year. The second year in the campaign, we won what's called meet and confer, okay? We know that in North Carolina, public sector workers don't have the right to... That's right. So meet and confer is kind of like a watered down version of collective bargaining, okay? We won that through struggle that second year. This third year, this past year, myself and others were elected to a meet and confer team where we essentially were negotiating with the bosses in the district for a full year, okay? And I'm talking about, again, teachers, bus drivers, custodial staff, every sector of the workforce had an elected representative in that body. And at the end of the first year, we won classified staff raises, budget transparency, collective grievance policy, and protections for our immigrant students against these ICE thugs that are snatching people up. All right. So, thank you. So I'm not going to get into all the nitty-gritty details of the campaign. If y'all want to talk to me later, I'm happy to talk. But I think the point is how we wanted to, right? We won that through solidarity. If we didn't stick with our coworkers when they started launching these wildcat strikes, it's hard to imagine we would have gotten to majority, okay? We did it through unity. We stood together, whether you were classified workers, certified, didn't matter. We built democratic structures and we flexed our muscle to shut down the city, okay? Or shut down the school district. So I mentioned this the other day in talking about the campaign that afterwards we had like a little meeting where we were evaluating how things went. We did kind of a go around and people were saying, how'd you feel? And I felt strong, I felt proud, I felt this and that. And then we got to this one woman, elementary school teacher, she'd been in the district for a minute. And she kind of paused for a second and she goes, y'all, I felt like I was in a movie, okay? And it always struck me, it stood with me because I think a lot of times when it comes to this sort of thing, we sort of are passive spectators. We're just watching the movie, right? And I think what struggle does is it turns us into protagonists in those movies, right? And that's really what we need is for more of us, more working people to be protagonists in the struggle and not just sitting on the couch and watching everything go by, okay? And what we're facing right now, what a lot of us are watching, is a horror movie, okay? And so it's a horror movie where we've got masked ICE monsters snatching up our friends, our family members, students, and coworkers, right? It's where monsters in suits attack our schools, our hospitals, our unions, and our planet. Where the monsters of empire drop bombs on Palestinians, Iranians, Lebanese people, and beyond. Where the housing monsters make it harder and harder to put a roof over our heads. Where the media monsters teach us to fear, hate, and demonize the other, only to feed more monsters. And where the monsters who own and control our workplaces are forcing us to work more for less. Again, only to feed more monsters, right? So if y'all want to help me slay these monsters, say slay. Slay. All right, I got y'all to say slay. Say all day, every day.
All day, every day.
So we already know the weapons we need. I went through a number of them already. Y'all already got one. That's organization. Okay, that's key. We got solidarity. We need unity. We need internationalism, right? We can't limit our fight to Durham, Charlotte, Greensboro, whatever it is. Okay, our fight is everywhere. We need independence. We can't trust these fools in the city, state, or the White House. We got to do it ourselves, okay? We need rank and file democracy, and we need militancy, okay? The laws are stacked against us. They are not made for us, okay? They are made against us, okay? So what we've seen both in Durham and elsewhere And in the past few years, we've seen the kind of militancy, at least hints of it, across the country. We need more of it, okay? And so thinking about all these principles made me kind of go back to, and I'm sad I didn't see one of them out here, but I remember getting one of those little us versus them booklets, right? That UE put out a few years ago. And I think that kind of spirit is the kind of spirit that we need to be bringing into our organizations, into our unions. So when I say it's them, y'all say versus us. It's them
Versus us.
It's them
Versus us.
It's them.
Versus us.
Thank you.